Violence in Ukraine. The ninth day of combat features fierce fighting and a drama at a nuclear power plant. China and Taiwan. We assess their historic tensions as the Russia-Ukraine conflict deepens. Fight for the unborn. Another state is set to pass a new pro-life law. And embassy anniversary. We hear more about the relationship between the Vatican and Japan. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, March 4th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of St. Casimir. I'm Tracy Sabol. Russian troops have seized the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. The fire was later extinguished and no radiation was released. The attack took place in the southeastern part of Ukraine, and the regular staff continued to run the plant. There has also been minor diplomatic progress. Russia and Ukraine have reached a tentative agreement to set up safe corridors to evacuate citizens, food, and medicine. Philip Crowther, Associated Press international affiliate reporter, joins us now from the Poland-Ukraine border. Philip, good to see you. As we just mentioned, Russia has taken control of that nuclear power plant in Ukraine, the largest in Europe. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, there were real fears last night, during the night, that there could have even been an escape of radioactive material from that nuclear power plant. There was a fire burning there, but it was not on one of the reactors, it was on one of the administrative buildings. But to see Russian rockets hit a nuclear plant, the biggest one in Europe, got a lot of people worried last night, including, of course, the Ukrainian government. It keeps on asking for more help from the West. It wants a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Now, who would be able to implement that? Well, only NATO, with the United States at its head, of course, and that is something that NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg absolutely said was not going to happen. What we're seeing on the ground in Ukraine is that Russian forces are advancing. It might be slow in some areas around the capital city of Kyiv, for example, but still Russian forces are moving toward that capital city from the south. For example, the fact that they were able to take over a nuclear power plant, and the biggest one in Europe, is just one more sign that this is not exactly going according to plan for Russia, but those advances are being made.
And Philip, can you give us an update where you are at the Poland-Ukraine border and the refugee situation? I understand that many of them are children.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason for this. There are mainly women and children who are arriving here at this train station in Przemyśl. This is the closest big town to the closest border we have here between Ukraine and Poland. And this is a place where trains are still arriving from the Ukrainian capital city. There is a reason why there are so many children and women here. It's because the men who have Ukrainian citizenship are not allowed to leave the country. Anybody between the ages of 18 and 60 has to stay behind. They are all expected to fight the war if need be. Now, today also I spent some time at Medica. Medica is the closest border station from here, around 10 miles up the road from here. Now, we've seen thousands of refugees crossing the border there and hundreds lining up tonight trying to get a seat on a bus that will bring them to this town. And from here, they hope to get on other buses that can take them to other cities here in Poland or to anywhere where they might be able to link up with friends or family members. It's a pretty chaotic situation on the Ukrainian side. I can tell you from a conversation I had with a Nigerian student, he says he had to walk for 3 hours in order to get over that border and into Poland. Here, though, things are pretty well organized. The humanitarian relief efforts are very impressive, and there is a lot of gratitude from refugees toward the Polish government and toward the Polish people.
And Philip, how far are we from seeing an end to this war? What do you think from what you're seeing?
Look, any signs that we're seeing are minimal steps toward any kind of little peace agreements. You know that there are talks happening between the Ukrainians and Russians. Those aren't peace talks. It's simply the fact that Ukrainians and Russians are able to get together at a table on the border with Belarus. That's already a good sign. Sure, the two sides are talking, but humanitarian corridors, as you mentioned, have been agreed upon in theory. They don't exist yet at this point. These are all little plans that still have to be developed. There are no signs from Russian President Vladimir Putin that he wants to put the brakes on his invasion. There are no signs on the ground that show that either. And diplomatically, as I mentioned, there don't seem to be any particular advances right now. A lot of Ukrainian cities are being shelled, they're being bombed by the Russians right now, and they don't seem to be letting up at this point. And of course, in the capital city of Kiev, the fears are very, very tangible that Russian forces want to encircle the capital city, maybe strangle it, and somehow get Ukraine to give up that way. What we know, of course, from the ground, from people we know who are going into the country to fight, from those I met before I left Kiev as well, these are men, Ukrainian men, who are willing to fight, who are willing to defend their country. They will not be giving it up easily.
Oh, Philip, thank you so much. And again, please stay safe. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo wants the U.S. to diplomatically recognize Taiwan.
The Taiwanese people deserve the world's respect for continuing down this free, democratic, and sovereign path.
Pompeo was speaking during a visit to the self-ruled island where he met with President Xi. Responding to questions, he said Beijing has a deep intent to project power globally and is watching the situation between Russia and Ukraine. And joining me now is Gordon Chang, author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War and The Coming Collapse of China. Gordon, welcome back. Always so great to see you. Let's talk about former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, his visit to Taiwan, and his comments about diplomatically recognizing Taiwan as a sovereign nation. How significant is that?
It's extremely significant because he was Secretary of State. Now, of course, he didn't do it in the Trump administration, but that was because that would have been breaking established U.S. policy. But what he is he's voicing concerns that we have heard throughout the American political spectrum. And really, this is paving the way for much closer relations between Washington and Taipei. So I think that this is going to be a landmark request, and I think other people are going to follow it.
And Gordon, as you know, the war in Ukraine has brought up concerns over whether a similar situation will actually take place in Taiwan. However, Taiwan's government said earlier this week that people should abandon the Ukraine today, Taiwan tomorrow mindset because, quote, in all areas, the two cannot be compared. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. And what do you think?
Of course they can be compared because you have a major power trying to grab territory which it thinks is its own. And in both cases, you have a people who are determined to defend what they have. In the case of Ukraine, I think that the heroics that we are seeing are really starting to resonate in Taiwan. But also in Taiwan, they understand that they have to defend themselves. And one of the things you're hearing among Taiwanese people is that the island's going to have to do much more to protect itself against China, that it can't rely on the international community. And so, therefore, I think China is sort of in a position where Taiwan is now much more prepared to defend itself than it was 2 weeks ago.
I want to talk now about the relationship between China and Russia. And do you think that relationship has changed at all since the invasion of Ukraine?
In the beginning of the invasion, China green-lighted that, and it green-lighted it with that 5,000-word joint statement, the No Limits Partnership, and the announcement of all the commodity deals. I think, though, Beijing is now getting to be a little bit embarrassed and very surprised. I think that Beijing believed that the Russians would roll over Ukraine, which would fall within hours, because that's what China actually says about Taiwan, that when China invades, and that's their words, they believe ours. What's going on right now is Beijing must be reassessing that because they're seeing much more stout defense, how a small country from various ways is able to hold off a bigger one. And that lesson is not lost in Beijing. And of course, it's not lost in Taiwan either. So right now, I think China's a little bit embarrassed about their support for Vladimir Putin and probably trying to distance themselves, not from a substantive point of view, because they're still financing the Russians, but I think from an appearance point of view, they would rather appear to be more neutral.
And Gordon, we have probably 20 seconds left or so, but quickly, I'd like to get your final thoughts on all what you see playing out in Ukraine and also how China may factor in.
Well, Russia has decided it's going to use everything to go in and take out Ukraine. We should be prepared for Russia to use weapons of mass destruction, either chemical weapons or even tactical nukes. Right now, this is a very dangerous situation for Putin. He's going to do all that he can and whatever weapon he has in his arsenal.
All right, Gordon, thank you so much. Appreciate your time as always.
Thank you, Tracy.
The White House engages in more international diplomacy today. President Joe Biden hosted the president of Finland. That nation does not belong to NATO yet, but the invasion of Ukraine has them reconsidering a possible threat from their Russian neighbor. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, good evening to you. President Biden welcomed the president of Finland to the White House today. And according to one poll, a majority of people in Finland now support that country joining NATO. And President Biden, also phoned other foreign leaders today to talk about the Ukraine situation. And he sent his top diplomat to Europe.
The Russian attack and takeover of a Ukrainian nuclear power plant prompted an urgent White House phone call. President Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke about the resulting fire and threat of nuclear contamination.
What we saw last night was a reckless action of war in and around a nuclear power plant, and this just demonstrates the danger of this war.
Europe also on high alert. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is there to coordinate with his counterparts.
Every ally, in one way or another, is coming to Ukraine's assistance.
And President Biden called President Duda of Poland this morning. The Polish people have seen a flood of Ukrainian women and children pour across the border seeking refuge from the war. And back in the U.S., Americans are witnessing stock market swings and a significant spike in gas prices, the largest jump since Hurricane Katrina in 2005.
Folks, America's coming back. It really is.
President Biden still optimistic. He held an event this afternoon promoting his proposal to increase American manufacturing. And the White House praises today's jobs report, showing 678,000 more hires last month and low unemployment, falling to 3.8%.
Over the course of my presidency, our economy has now created 7.4 million jobs. More jobs created in a 13-month period than any time ever before in our history.
Also today here at the White House, Vice President Kamala Harris met with the Crown Prince of Bahrain, and the White House says they discussed Ukraine, Iran, and the, quote, opportunities presented by the historic Abraham Accords. And President Biden heads to Delaware tonight. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, a church leader in Argentina is facing more than 4 years in prison. Plus, the U.S. Capitol may soon reopen its doors to the public. We'll explain. Lawmakers in Florida have approved a heartbeat bill which would prohibit most abortions after 15 weeks. It has exceptions, including if the mother's life and safety are at risk. The measure now moves to Governor Ron DeSantis for his expected signature. The U.S. Capitol building may soon be open to the public again. This after the Senate recently passed a resolution. As Republican Bill Hagerty of Tennessee tells EWTN News Nightly, reopening the complex is long overdue.
The Senate has been locked down for the better part of 2 years. This is the people's building. The Capitol are the halls of the American public. We should set an example and open up.
Others say the sooner the better.
Kids came here last week, had a couple hundred kids from South Alabama, had a 12-hour bus ride up here. Took a picture with them out on the steps, but they couldn't go in the Capitol. That's wrong. We got people that absolutely just lazy. I mean, it's just, they don't want to make a decision.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she supports reopening the Capitol complex to visitors, but needs the okay from the House and Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, along with the Capitol Physician's Office.
I think you'll see an unfolding now of the Capitol opening. It's about COVID and it's about security. Mostly it's about COVID, though.
Some lawmakers tell EWTN News Nightly a decision to reopen the Capitol complex may be coming in the next few weeks. At least 56 people are dead and nearly 200 injured following an explosion at a mosque in northern Pakistan. The blast took place during Friday prayers in the city of Peshawar. An investigation is underway. Early reports indicate that a suicide bomber entered the building after shooting a security detail. A bishop in Argentina has received a 4.5-year prison term after being found guilty for sexual misconduct. Bishop Gustavo Zancana was taunted after he left court following the verdict. He was convicted of sexual abuse against 2 seminarians, which he denied. Bishop Zancana had been appointed to a financial office at the Holy See in 2017 by Pope Francis, but was put on leave when that scandal broke. Up next, a 900-year-old religious order welcomes a new church and library. Well, the country of Japan and the Vatican are celebrating a milestone this year. The two established diplomatic ties in 1942. To celebrate this anniversary, the Embassy of Japan to the Holy See has organized an event in collaboration with one of the Vatican schools called Empowerment of Women in Conflict Areas. There are around 500,000 Catholics in Japan. Joining us now from Rome is Seiji Okada, Ambassador of Japan to the Holy See. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. Can you tell us more about this conference and why you chose this theme?
Yes, the seminar we had this morning we talked about the empowerment of the women, particularly in the conflicting area. You know, I think it's very important to share the project we had in South Sudan, particularly. It's such a coincidence. Just yesterday, the Pope, just announced that his scheduled visit to South Sudan in July. I think it's very important for us to know that what's the situation now, what is the situation in South Sudan, and what we had, particularly to empower the women. I believe, in a conflict, always the victim is the women and children. So from that point of view, we just focused on how we empower the women, particularly in the conflict area in South Sudan.
Speaking of your embassy to the Holy See, can you tell us about your relations with the Vatican and also what else you'll be doing to mark this important anniversary?
Well, actually, this year is a special year for us, for the Japanese embassy here, because this year is the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the diplomatic relation with Japan and the Vatican. We opened our embassy in 1942, and we are having an embassy here in the Vatican for 80 years. And during that 80 years, we kept a very good relation between Japan and the Vatican. And particularly, 2019, the Holy Father visited Japan. That was a very significant event for both Japan and the Vatican.
And lastly, can you tell us what's the current situation of the Catholic Church and the faithful in Japan?
In Japan, actually, the number of the Catholic, people is rather small, but I think the most of the Japanese share the idea of the Christianity and share the same value. So in that sense, there are many Catholic universities in Japan, and there are many students, study in these universities. And at the same time, I think for Japan, as I told you, that the Holy Father visited Japan in 2019, and he visited Nagasaki and Hiroshima. As you may know, these two cities, the only cities in our history that experienced a nuclear bomb attack. And actually, particularly at this time, I think it's a very important meaning, because when the Pope visited two cities, he appealed to the world about the peace and non-nuclear weapon And at this moment, it's very important for all of us to recall his appeal of the kind of the horror of using the nuclear bomb, nuclear weapon. So while now we see the very difficult situation in the part of the Europe, and we have to again recall the Holy Father's appeal that we have to really follow his appeal to keep everything settled down.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Finally tonight, St. Michael's Abbey in California has a beautiful new library, and that is not all. I recently spoke with Father Justin Ramos, who told us about the Abbey's latest updates. Joining me now is Father Justin Ramos from St. Michael's Abbey in the Diocese of Orange in California. Father Justin, great to see you. Thank you so much for your time today. Tell us about the progress of the new Abbey and the completion of the library.
Yes, as you might know, last year we dedicated this brand new abbey, and we consecrated the church on the 4th of May. But there was still a lot to be done after that, particularly in the church. All of the artwork is still going in, and we progressed quite a bit. Since the dedication, there have been a lot of things that have been added, and I guess the most important thing is the triumphal arch of the church, which now has millions of little tiny tesserae, or little tiles, of beautiful Venetian tesserae that compose a beautiful image of Revelation 12, which is the where it says that a great sign appeared in the sky, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. It is a beautiful mosaic that was begun a little north of Venice and has been now installed and is now the crown jewel of all the art in the Abbey Church. And we had been working with the gentlemen and all of the workers in Venice for the last 4 years. And finally it got done, and it's going to be dedicated later on, probably on the Feast of St. Joseph. So that's something to behold. I haven't seen anything as beautiful on this side of the Mississippi, especially since Our Lady is 17 feet tall. There are the beautiful cherubim, St. Michael the Archangel, and St. Gabriel also are present in the mosaic. And then you have angels who are blowing the trumpet, and the dead are rising from their graves, and then some are being escorted into heaven, others are not going to heaven. It's really a beautiful teaching tool, as well as a way to raise your mind and your heart to God. It's a sursum corda, raising our mind and hearts to God. So that's probably the most exciting thing that has just been completed in the last couple of weeks.
Father Justin, can you tell us about maybe some of the works that are housed in the new library?
This collection, that we have 2 collections in this library that are of noteworthy importance. One of them is the Sir Henry Chadwick's collection. He was an expert in early church history. So we have his collection, and part of his family was here for the dedication. And then we have another collection. It's the Odin collection. And I believe he was one of the editors for a series of books that was put out of the early Christian fathers. So that was just dedicated 2 weeks ago, and we finished with a very beautiful talks and conferences on different topics about monastic libraries.
It all sounds so incredible and so wonderful. I also want to mention that it's also the 900th anniversary of the Nobertines. Can you tell us a little bit more about the order and St. Nobert?
Sure. Well, it was during a thunderstorm that Norbert of Xanten is kind of, it's northern Germany. He was a worldly cleric. He was thrown off his horse, and then he heard God's call to conversion, very much like Saint Paul, the apostle. And so it was one man, one moment, gave birth to the Norbertines, and he kindled a flame that has endured for 900 years. The order was founded on Christmas 1121 in Prémontré, France. And St. Norbert, with his first confreres, really wanted to focus on the reform of priestly life. And that's how the order was born. And St. Norbert and his confreres are especially in the early days, were very devoted for their love of the Holy Eucharist. And so St. Norbert is always depicted holding the Eucharist up high.
Well, Father Justin, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us about all of this. We appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for having me. And God bless you all and for all the good work you do.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.